Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat podcast. My name's Stu Turley, President CEO of the Sandstone Group. I've got a fantastic show for you today. I'll tell you what, I've got an old friend of the podcast that has stopped by, and Debra Wold is such a fantastic influence in so many ways on LinkedIn, and she's the CEO of Grenelily, and there's a Grenelily Holding, and there's several other companies. But let's go ahead and get started on some of the topics that we're going to cover today. We're talking about the renewable energy. We're talking about nuclear. We're talking about humanity. But we're also talking about one of the biggest movements in the U.S. that is happening, and that's the parents' involvement in their schools and looking at homeschooling. There is curriculum that is out there. But the feedback that we're getting from Energy Newsbeat is the curriculum in the energy space. And we are trying to raise money to help all of our content be turned into. Deborah, I think that was a horrible way to talk, or in Oklahoma, where be turned into. We're going to look to have automatic testing and everything turned into testing for homeschooling. So, Deborah, thank you for taking the time on something that you're so passionate about.
Thank you, Stuart, for having me again as your guest. I'm very honored, as always.
Well, I'll tell you, you're a retread, as I affectionately call, great guests that have come back on. And your episodes, quite selfishly, Deborah, have gone ballistic. You're what's called an evergreen, and it's nice. It's not something that you have to worry about. Your evergreen episodes are always in the top episodes that we put out. So I always put that at the front of the show because everybody's like, top episode. So, just tell us a little bit as we get started. What are you doing with Grenelily, and what are your opinions there?
Absolutely. So Grenelily Energy and Water is a business and development company. Again, Grenelily Holding is our holding company, which encompasses all their other companies. And we've been so privileged to stay in the green energy business by, we're going to simplify it down now, because a lot of people are saying, what is a waste to energy? Well, basically what we're doing is we're taking trash, if I had something trashy here, and then transforming that into low-cost fuel and low-cost electricity. And we're putting ourselves at the carbon neutral table where you have solar, wind, hydrothermal, nuclear, natural gas, oil. There is a place for waste to energy. And waste to energy is a key component because we're taking 7.5, let's say, metric tons of trash out of the landfills, right, and then turning that into low-cost electricity, which is benefit for the economy and business, and low-cost fuels.
And some of your biggest targets are municipalities, and yes, talking about additional revenue for the municipalities. I love that. Was a big segment as we watch, what parts are listened to and where they spend time on the page, right, and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And the reason why municipalities, because municipalities have residents, and residents are families. So this right, all intertwines with the topics that we're going to be talking today. Because families are hurting right now with the economy and the way things are naturally going. It is slowing down. Yep. What you're going to be choosing between, like, do I buy groceries? Do I buy fuel? Do right, I, those kind of questions are coming in. So municipalities can benefit from this by way of passing it on to their residents, which right, therefore helps them in multiple levels.
What's fun is the FERC, which is the regulatory agency, has been putting out, Deborah, that there are so many grid problems coming around the corner, and they're saying, go ahead and get prepared, get your generators. I can't believe that I saw that from Secretary Granholm yesterday. Yeah. She says, get your generators ready. And I'm like, they are so anti-generator that what's about to happen. I'm over here kind of going, I'm always preaching, be ready to prepare for your family.
Right.
And as you sit back and we talk about the cities, how cool is that for the cities to build additional RNG, which is renewable natural gas, from their methane
Right,
out of a landfill so they
right.
can generate power for the cities. I'm sorry. I love your story. I'm over here going, green lily, green lily. Sorry.
No, no. And we feel the exact same way. And that's why we're so blessed to be connected to the owner of the technology and the patents. And actually, what we're doing, a little plug here, we're going to be down in Alito on the 17th doing a huge presentation. The owner of the technology is actually coming in
Oh,
and doing a
sweet.
presentation. Yeah, for down in Alito. So we're going to be having multiple entities coming in from the union,
Right.
politicians, farmers. Farmers are big because they need, low cost fuels, right?
Absolutely.
And the same thing with electricity. So,
If we don't support our farmers, we don't eat. And I'm
uh,
a huge, I've got some agricultural leaders
right.
coming by, and I'm just starting that whole because
Cool.
the support for the it's like all the Germans that we're not seeing that on the news. And the German farmers are protesting. I love a good farmer. I love the family farms. It's how we
Yep.
got made as a country.
Exactly. And one thing is I grew up halfway on a farm. So basically my summer times were working on 3 farms with my grandparents.
How
And
fun.
then, yeah, it was really good. And I learned a lot of values. I learned a lot of good ethics and morals and principles. My
Yep.
work ethic came from that.
Yep. I'll tell you, my work ethic came from my grandparents who ran
Yeah.
a dairy farm as well too, and my dad who retired as chief of staff of the Eighth Air Force. I kind of learned how to work hard all my life, but enjoy what you do. And
Exactly.
my dad enjoyed flying fighters all of his life. So I mean, it's like, all right. And then my granddad, everybody loved being farmers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's tough, tough work, and you're learning how to do that. But as we talk about the energy thread in
Yes.
this particular story, we're seeing, Deborah, you and I had been talking about the homeschooling and the green movements that are pushing non-humanitarian languages.
Correct.
And that means that they're looking at putting wind power that is not sustainable based on you have to have the subsidies. And we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing the ESG investing, and now how this works with your schooling and your homeschool consortiums is they have no material, because in the public school, you and I talked about, they're being force fed one way:
Right.
wind farms and
Right.
solar farms. But
Yep.
Deborah, all these kids want phones. Have you? That's electricity generation. Have you
Right.
ever been able to make a phone for these kids out of a windmill?
Nope. Nope. Not at all.
What did your consortium tell you?
Basically, we've been homeschooling our daughter
Yep.
since the time we began schooling.
Yep.
We chose to do that because we knew that, 20 some 30 years ago, at that time there was PTA meetings. Parents could meet with the school boards. They could bring their ideas to the meetings. The school board would say, yep, I'm a parent. I agree to that. Let's incorporate it into the system. But nowadays there's this resistance, and it's like this huge tsunami that's been building up with ideology. Now, here's the thing. I have friends who are going into school to become teachers. I have friends who are current teachers, and I have friends who are retired teachers. And I'd say about 30 in my influence, right?
Right.
And they all told me this.
Okay.
It's better for you to homeschool right now with what is going on in the culture.
Wow.
Now, this is 12 years ago, because what's happening is not what we were taught. We were
Yeah.
told math, science, history, English, all the basics, all your academics, right? But things have changed. And you almost wonder, like, how far back does this go? When the PTA meetings were no longer viable, and there was no dialogue where the school boards were
Right.
listening. And we're not condemning anybody, but for myself and my husband, we have chosen to take on that responsibility. And there's thousands of other families that are doing the same thing. And it's happened more and more since COVID kicked in. and
Right.
kids were being taken home to school,
Right.
parents were seeing what the curriculum was that the kids are learning,
Right.
right? They were looking over their shoulder going, oh, that's an interesting comment. But here's the also thing too with homeschooling and the energy, right? We were talking energy. My daughter was just doing a class on science.
Right.
That teacher had the audacity to say that fossil fuels were bad for the environment. I'm like, you're in homeschool. Are you kidding me? So I wrote her a letter, and I've been in this program for a long time.
Right.
And I said, on what premise, on what foundation do you have to put in the curriculum that fossil fuel is not viable and good for the environment? You need to show me your facts.
Right.
She wrote me a letter back and said, well, this is part of our new curriculum.
Exactly.
And I said, well, then I have a suggestion for you, my dear. You need to get into the know. And Stuart, I did bring you up, even though this is not actively going. And this is a very large platform, huge platform.
Right.
And I said, we need to educate on facts, not fiction or what you're being told.
Right.
Fossil fuel is never going to go away.
Right.
Because we need low cost electricity and we need low cost fuels. And your narrative, my daughter immediately, she flunked that class.
Right.
Because she said, no, mommy, I will not approve and say that fossil fuels are bad.
They flunked her?
They flunked her. That's why I wrote that letter.
Wow.
Because it wasn't on the test. Her test said all the things that they were supposed to say. And I said, darling, you go with your values and your morals and your principles in the way that you've been taught, not brainwashed. She knows logic and reason. Go ahead.
You know, this is why you and I are talking, because you know, everybody that listens to the show knows that I'm a humanitarian first.
Right.
I am energy agnostic from the standpoint that I like all forms of energy as long as they deliver the lowest cost kilowatt to everybody on the planet. And I'm visiting with leaders in Africa tomorrow about how the West is taking advantage of Africa. But we have to deliver the lowest cost kilowatt per hour. And why is Germany having such high and high inflation, high energy cost? Why have they attacked the farmers? Why is California twice as expensive as Texas? And Texas is our largest renewable energy, because you can use both. Why is New York Governor Hochul trying to shut down natural gas? And let me get to the feed right now, and I want to see how many people are without power and what cities they are in right now.
Good point.
Let's go to my power outage US. And right now there are about 100,000 people out of power in New York and New Jersey, and then North Carolina and Michigan. Last night I looked at it, and there was almost 700,000 people without power last night. So, and it's the rest of the country. California had bad weather, and they were like almost 300,000 without power a couple of days ago. So it's about grid stability.
Yes.
And why don't they teach grid stability?
I agree. Because see, it's like the elephant in the room, right? And you're looking through the fence. You see that you're looking through the little hole, and you can only see a piece of the elephant. And that's what they're doing with the kids. They're not showing the elephant on the other side. I'm like, tear down the fence and let's get to reality, because they're the next generation that are going to have to come up with different types of technology to keep our grids going, so they can live and have their generations live.
Right. And what a great thing for Grenelily to be able to talk about removal of waste, because that's one of my biggest pet peeves about solar and wind. Again, I love solar, I love wind if it can be recycled. It cannot be recycled. We are dumping our millions of solar panels and putting them and shipping them out and putting them in other countries. How despicable is that?
It's disgusting. And how are we teaching children to be responsible, socially responsible. There are children in other countries. So we live in the United States. It's a wonderful country.
Right.
God has blessed us greatly. But why are we putting our burden? Remember a long time ago when they were shipping the trash from Canada? I think it was to the Philippines on barges.
Yep.
And I don't know if those barges ever made it back to Canada, let us say, right? They might have got sunken, maybe. We don't know, do we?
Right. No, and the whole thing about that is um, it is despicable that the West is taking advantage of other countries and other continents. And I would like to give a shout out to folks and say, not all Americans are the ones that are leading this country.
Yep.
Most everybody I talk to hates not being able to recycle your energy. Now, carbon capture, yay! Let's get into carbon capture. I don't care. Let's make sure it's the least amount of methane being released. Yay! But the homeschool testing programs, Deborah, would it help if we had all of our news channels and all of our stuff put into testing to be fair so that it's fact-based for homeschooling consortiums?
Absolutely 100%. Because right now, what you're having is a narrative taught from a scientific point of view from people who've never been out of the school district or schooling. You need subject matter experts to come in and say, I'm on the gas fields, I'm on the oil fields, I'm with the nuclear companies. We know what's going on because we're boots on the ground.
Right.
That would help the teachers as well. And I think a lot of science teachers would be open, and even history teachers would be open, because the basics is the kids need to know what is going on.
Right.
It's not, they don't need to know what fictionally is going on, or, they need to know what's real time going on. We take our daughter to the landfills because we say, she's not foolish. She knows that these things are bad.
Right.
But there's no other alternative at this point to deal with the trash. You got to put it somewhere.
Right.
The same thing. Go ahead.
Sorry, Deborah, you and I would be dangerous because both of us talk with our hands, and we would be absolutely horrible in the same room. And your husband and my wife couldn't even stand near us because we'd be beating each other. Now, when we sit back and take a look at, there were some folks that I just found out about last week, and they had a great beginning of a just energy documentary, exactly what we were talking about. And they couldn't get funding from Netflix unless they were going to cover nuclear, they were going to cover wind, solar, natural gas, coal. They just want to lay the facts out. That's what they wanted in this documentary. And they could get the funding immediately to do this. But Netflix said, unless you come up with a wind and solar narrative that we don't need anything else, we won't get you the funding. I'm like,
wow.
What about putting out facts? Facts and physics matter. At least they
just, it's interesting. Just thinking about it, a side thought, right? Why doesn't Netflix run their whole entire operation on solar and wind? And let's see how successful they are.
Oh, absolutely. And I would love to go ahead and say, let's make an experiment. I have to give a shout out. I can't remember who's been saying this. Either it was Michael Schellenberg or someone, and they were saying, let's just let New York go ahead and shut down all petroleum products coming in. If they've touched petroleum, if you have to use diesel, and only use electric generated by wind and solar.
Yep.
I'm all in. New York, let's have an experiment.
Yeah.
They would be out of New York City, no tax, and it would be, did you ever see the movie with Snake Plissken, Escape from New York?
No.
You're too smart. I'm sure you probably didn't see it. And Snake Plissken they turned New York City into a prison. And it was so
Wow.
bad, they've had the gate around it and everything else, and it had just turned into a wasteland. I think that's what would happen in New York. You know,
Absolutely.
let's use all forms of energy and have the least amount of impact on the environment.
Exactly. And that's what the children need to hear, not
Right.
the other. It's like social responsibility. A lot of
Right.
the kids, so I teach religious education. And what happens is the kids come into my class, the public school kids, and there's not that many homeschool kids. And they say, we're being told by our teachers we have to save the environment.
Right.
Miss Wold, how do we do this? That's a lot of burden on us. So one of the kids had a bottle and they're like drinking out of it. And one of the kids went to put it in the garbage can.
Right.
And said, oh, no, no, no. You can't put it into the trash can. You got to recycle that. So
Right.
I said, give me the bottle. I taught them a little bit about what we do.
Right.
My daughter's like, she's a trash lady. So listen to mama. She knows what she's talking about. And I said, we can take this, guys. I know, isn't that lovely? I said, darling, better be careful with that. We can take this bottle, which is considered trash, right? Could be recyclable, depending
Right.
on what number it is, and transform it into treasure.
Yep.
So you put it in the garbage can. You don't have to sort it out. And they said, well, why aren't we being taught this in school?
Right.
Why don't we know about this? Because all we're doing is feeling guilty because we're not finding the right recyclable containers that this goes into.
Right.
And that's not educating them. Educating them is saying, got a problem? Like Elon does, right?
Right.
Critical thinking. Let's create a solution.
Yep.
That would be like a perfect way, a segue into the homeschool program. Problems into solutions. Use that critical thinking process where they can implement it and figure out ways. Maybe there's something even better than waste to energy, but the kids aren't going to give an opportunity and thus challenged.
Absolutely. And I've seen some of those life hacks that are absolutely hilarious where you see them on Twitter. I use almost Twitter and LinkedIn only. And I love it where you see a bottle being cut in a very nice way. And then they're using it for rope, or they're reusing that plastic for things that you need around the house.
Exactly.
I'm all in. I think that that's
Absolutely.
wonderful. But more importantly, using it for energy. And not all recyclable plastics can be used safely. And
No.
so I'm trying to figure out that whole aspect of it.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. And that's the other thing too, with the technology that we have, just a plug there, is our plants are zero carbon footprint.
Right.
We don't have smokestacks. So everything that's out of that product that comes out of there, we can create 70 different products.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're even getting better than what we had before.
Downstream products, so oil-based chemicals could be made without smokestacks and waste.
Yep.
See,
retrofit coal plants, the same thing. I mean, there's all kinds of options and ideas because the patent owner has all this.
Did you just say retrofit coal plants?
Yeah, betcha. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Zero emission.
Retrofit zero emission coal plants. Do you know what that would do for the world?
Yes.
In 2023, the coal usage around the world has exploded. King coal is not dead yet. And when you consider the US, we have 80% of fossil fuels, which I hate that word, for electrical energy and generation, which is nuclear, natural gas, oil, and coal. And so if you sit back and kind of go zero emissions, the Biden administration regulatory problems just released at 3 o'clock in the morning, right before COP28, a whole new set of regulatory issues to shut down coal plants before they have the wind and solar electrical generation. You can't really call them wind energy. You can't call them really wind solar. They're just designed for electrical generation. It's not really energy.
No. And when you take the coal plants away, you're taking away union jobs. I mean, that's another factor, right? So you're hurting the family, which therefore hurts their education of their children.
You know, you just said the word union. And one of the things that I can see very strongly is the unions get a bad rap a lot of times, and you always
Mhm.
hear, I do a lousy Putin imitation, Deborah, and hey, he's called up and said, "You stink. You're a lousy Putin imitation," and it happens to be the same one that I've seen for people on unions and going,
Uh-huh.
"Hey, you don't do that," and I mean, it's like that's a bad, excuse me, representation of unions. If we were go to small modular nuclear reactors, SMRs,
Uh-huh.
we need a well trained workforce
Yes.
that could support building high tech things with regulatory issues. I'm all for good regulatory issues and well trained unions and making it happen, because I don't trust, I'm going to say this, and I know I'm canceled. I don't trust governments. And
Mhm.
I would prefer to have a union with
Yes.
regulatory issues, with good regulations, building
Yes.
SMRs,
Yes.
building small modular reactors.
Yep.
Um, Deborah, I just talked to Grace Stanky when she was in Dubai.
Uh-huh.
The UAE built a nuclear reactor running 25% of their power in 5 years on time and on budget.
See,
The
that's
US can't do that.
no. And I'm a union daughter, number one, very proud of it because my father was an iron worker. Number two, I have a union, Tommy DeSanto. Sorry, Tommy, but I'll put your name out there. I adore him because he supports everything that we do because he brings in the union.
Right.
Union jobs for working families. It goes
Right.
back to that nucleus where we need to be. And with our
Yep.
projects, we're going to construct them union and build them union. So
Right.
we're going to maybe spearhead it out there with everybody else. And Stuart, you're right. The union know what they're doing. They have these wonderful apprenticeship programs that train the people that come in. Not everybody's going to go to college and become a rocket scientist. So
No, and I'm going to be honest with you. I would hate to pay and send my child to college these days because all they do is come out with absolutely no knowledge.
yeah, exactly. But you go to an apprenticeship program, it's hands-on. And I just read an article about Elon in his new school that he has for his children.
No
It's
way.
critical thinking and problem solving, but he's not opening it up yet to everybody. But he homeschools his kids, in other words, in his own way.
Right.
And puts them like the apprenticeship programs do. They give them a problem. Let's figure it out. You got these subject matter experts around them. They're all union. They've been there, done that. They
Right.
teach the kids how to take care of the problem, but do it right. Safety, on time, and under budget.
And
How much better?
accountability.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So that's why
And
we chose that.
what's also sad about the unions is that everybody has been on this EV. I love EVs only from the standpoint I love the idea of plugging it in. The grid
Yes.
can't support it.
Yeah.
And then the move to the lithium battery technology is robbing the kids in Africa, excuse me, in China,
Mhm.
of their childhood.
Oh,
And so that is really a sad component. But when we sit back and take a look at the homeschooling and the education process, I'm proud of you and I'm proud of the families that are stepping up. I grew up in upstate New York and then spent a lot of my summers in Anadarko, Oklahoma, and went to Oklahoma State University. So I'm in that farmer kind of thing with
mhm.
the dairy farmer.
Yeah.
But Deborah, back then in New York had one of the best education systems because they had the Regents system for testing, and
Mm-hmm.
that kept the teachers teaching high quality science
Right.
and everything else. And when I went to college, I was bored out of my mind. Coming out of college, high school out of New York had a very good education system.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, it went to hay in a handbasket.
And that's sad, isn't it?
It
It's like all
is.
that money been invested into that. And homeschooling is not that expensive. I mean, we're already paying taxes for our public schools. I mean, it's not like it's a benefit to us homeschoolers. We got to pay double taxes, in other words, because
Right.
we do pay for our programs. But as parents, we take that responsibility and we put an investment into our children. You invest in right into their faith. Why not
Right.
invest into their education? And it's really important to invest knowing what's the best homeschool program
Right.
out there that teaches the facts.
Deborah, how do we work in and take a look and, I'm looking for funding to help accelerate this program of getting testing for all of my great podcast and also for the other podcast of David Blackman and Ray Trevino on the Crude Truth, and taking their knowledge on geopolitical. Your podcast, I'm sorry, would be great. I'm being selfish again because I really enjoy having you as a guest because of the numbers that you generate, but we'll just go from there. But anyway, being selfish. And then getting that funding to create that and then get that into the consortiums at a good price point that it makes it affordable so that we can generate more. I mean, it's a which came first,
Right.
the curriculum, which we now have, but how do we
Right.
get that into the formats to make it easy for parents? And this is a long-winded way of asking a question,
Sure.
and that is, how do we make homeschooling easier for parents that don't have the time and have to work two jobs? That to me is something that, how do we help that? I
Right.
don't know. I don't even begin to know that answer.
Well, most homeschool programs are done online, which makes it a lot easier. So there's
Wow.
a lot of mobility involved. And a lot of parents, I don't know if they've gone back to work yet in the office or not, but in our situation, I have a home office and other offices. And the cool thing about it is we had a union presentation at the Lake of the Ozarks. My
Right.
daughter came with me. We were there for about 5 days. She did
Nice.
all her schoolwork right there, sitting next to the pool. So the mobility is very important. And I'm going
Wow.
to put a plug out for what you're doing too. I would encourage putting a list together of all the homeschool entities that are out there. There's some very large ones,
Right.
and they're from various backgrounds. Use this as a marketing tool to explain to them
Wow.
the value add of what the outside world really brings into the real world that the children are living into. So they're
Nice.
not getting a narrative from what people want them to hear, like
Right.
wash on, wash off, right? They're getting the reality of subject matter experts that come online like this, because all the
Right.
podcasts, they have their own like online programs.
Right.
So that, for an example, like say Ray would come on, Ray Trevani, and he would say, let's talk about the gas fields.
Right.
What's going on with the gas fields? How are we making ourselves more green? Or you have David Blockman come on and
Right.
talk about what he's doing. Because all you do is do little segments like they do in the homeschool programs online.
Right.
The parents will learn and they'll become more educated. The children will learn and they will be able to pass that on to the next generations. And I really believe that the homeschool programs will be very open to supporting this narrative, because maybe the information that they're getting right now is from past information.
Right.
Because the moment my daughter went on her program, when they started saying fossil fuel is bad,
Right.
someone's teaching them wrong. So I took the initiative, write them a letter and say, oh, no, where's your facts? If you don't know your facts, then I can help you. Go watch this. Here's this information, right? That's the connective between the two with homeschooling and what you're wanting to accomplish. And I know you will accomplish this, is bring it to them in a marketing piece, because parents will buy into this. We spend, not an enormous amount of money on homeschool, but if I know what my daughter is supposed to learn is going to help her in all the academics ways and scholastics ways, I'll invest into her, because she is our future, not just for our family, but for America and for the generations to come.
Uh, and I don't know enough, quite honestly, about the charter schools as well too. But I've
Oh,
been
sure.
talking to folks, and they're also good candidates for getting the right charter school.
Yeah.
Would be that. I used to work very heavily in the tech side for schools, and loved all the educators that I worked with,
Oh, yes. They're
and
wonderful.
everything else. And schools changed. Uh,
Yeah, it has.
and I love the small school districts, because you would walk in and the principals walking around, and all the kids were from the rural farms. And I mean, we sat down and we had a wonderful meal, home cooked meal
Right.
in the cafeteria. And I came in on a Friday, Deborah, and I realized that I noticed some of the kids were going back and forth for like 3 trips back.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there kind of going, why is this happening? And the superintendent said, because these kids won't eat again until Monday morning. And so we have a gigantic breakfast. And so that principal and superintendent, they just knew what was going on. How do we get that type of stuff in there? And that to me is where we need to be spending our money. And I'm going to go political for 1 second. Why are we spending all this money to Ukraine when we don't even have that kind of project? And I would love to have that kind of service for homeschoolers.
Hmm.
That to me would make sense.
Yes.
I mean, because we can't get a dad or a mom who's having to work that they can't feed their family. And I'm
Yes,
does that make sense? I mean, I'm
it does. It does. And you're right. And it is hard on the right now with the economy going the way it is.
right,
And moms and dad are stressed beyond comprehension. And they're looking at, okay, are they really looking at they're looking at putting food on the table. They're
right,
not really looking at the educational component that the kids are supposed to be learning. And it depends on what level they're at as far as their median income, let's say for the families, right?
right,
I'll give you a quick example. My daughter has a friend, and they started, beautiful young lady. She goes to a public school. We're not going to identify anything else outside of that. And she started changing. Her clothes started changing, going from very feminine to not so feminine.
right,
Different things started evolving out of this. And I told them, I said, I've got to investigate this. So I contacted their mom and I said, have you noticed, they're 2 income families. I said, have you noticed any change with your daughter? Oh, she got her hair, long hair to short hair.
right,
Big question. And then it's like little things you start changing with the kids. But if you're working 2 jobs and you're trying to put food on the table, right? Just trying to
right,
make a living, buy
right,
groceries or buy gas, sometimes your kids get lost, right? So I said, be more aware of the body changing. Something's not right. My daughter
right.
has really long hair, not to say that cut your hair is bad, but the imagery
All right,
started
now you're
changing.
bringing up the hair thing here. I'm sorry for our podcast listeners. I
I'll
got
get
a
you away.
flash for a hair color. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Just okay, keep going.
So the thing is that the bottom line is parents that have 2 jobs or,
Right,
trying to make ends meet don't really have a time to look at the kids and see what's going on. But a homeschool program would be able to bring the parents into it because we don't spend 8 hours a day doing, all the classes.
right,
She can get all her classes done in a 4-hour period with 15-minute breaks in between.
right.
So you're gaining back that time with your child. Number
Well,
one.
yep,
Number two, you don't have all these, get on the bus, do all these things like that. So you're also incorporating trust with you and your child.
right.
Because,
And
go ahead.
this is cool, but socialization is huge because we have generations
Very good.
got their head, like this.
Yeah.
And so socialization, are there if I remember right, I had a lot of friends at our church that did the homeschool, and they had homeschool parties and this kind of stuff. So
There,
I'm so you're an expert on homeschool parties, huh?
yes, yes. There is no limitation in socializing. My
Right.
daughter can communicate with executives. She was actually at one of my board meetings. It was so funny. She was 7 years old, and we were
Right.
sitting at the board meeting with all these bigwigs. We're talking the business, and we got into a loggerhead because we were arguing with each other, or disagreeing with each other on a
Right.
specific topic. My daughter's homeschooling, working on her computer because she was with me that day, and
Right.
she looks up and she's like, "So what's the real problem here? Is it because you don't like each other? Or is it because you can't come to a common solution?" 7 years old.
Nice.
Critical thinking, right? So we all
Yeah.
started laughing and we looked at each other going, well, there really is no problem. I think it's more of the fact that one of us wants to be right. So you have a 7-year-old who's learning these skills, right, in her
Right.
homeschooling. She picked herself, looked up at us and said, "Hey, what are you two? Basically, wake up. What are you doing?" And
Right.
she identified two topics that none of us were picking on, were picking up on.
Right.
We solved the problem after that. So there's no issue with socializing. They're intelligent, articulate. They can explain things very clearly. They can.
Right.
She's very nurturing too, because when you're in homeschooling, there's over 4,000 families in our particular area that homeschool. We have sports teams. We have all kinds of things going on right now. There's nothing that is limited in what we can do.
Well, hey, Deborah, last closing thoughts here. Um, how do we get in touch with you and how do people find you?
Okay. So I'm on LinkedIn under Grenelily Energy and Water, Debra Wold, and we do have a website, but it's under construction right now. But we'll be bringing out our great things that are coming up, and you can post it on your site somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. That sounds fantastic. For everybody listening, thank you all very much for stopping by the podcast. And Deborah is always welcome back. And thank you so much. We'll talk again soon, Deborah.
Sounds good. Thank you, Sherrod.